The impossible mission. The Galactic Council chamber was carved into the heart of a hollowed asteroid, orbiting serenely around a blue dwarf star. Its ceiling shimmered with holographic constellations, while delegates from 100 species filled the tiers of floating platforms, their voices buzzing, clicking, and rumbling in languages older than Earth itself. At the center hovered the anomaly, a projection of the swirling disaster that had dragged them all here. A corridor of space at the Orion Arm's edge had collapsed. Where once stable hyperspace lanes had flowed like cosmic highways, now storms of broken gravity ripped apart anything that entered. Fleets that had tried to cross were shredded. Probes vanished in bursts of static. Even automated drones sent in by the Kethri, known for their cold precision, were returned as molten wreckage. The anomaly was expanding, and if it spread too far, it would choke off half the trade routes of the galaxy. Whole civilizations would starve. The Council needed a volunteer. Unacceptable risk, hissed Ambassador Var, his glossy insectoid wings vibrating in agitation. His people had ruled the stars when humans were still hammering rocks together. No vessel can navigate such chaos. It is beyond survival probability. Agreed, sang the crystalline Vaith delegate, her body glowing with refracted light. The anomaly is death itself. To send any fleet is folly. One after another, voices joined the chorus of refusal. The scaled Creel, famous for waging wars inside the corona of suns, crossed his arms and growled, "Even we do not dare enter." No one blamed them. The anomaly was too unstable, too unpredictable, too impossible. At last, silence fell, and every eye turned toward the newest, youngest species in the chamber. The humans. They had only joined the Galactic Council a decade earlier, barely scraping their way into the ranks of star-faring civilizations. To most elder species, humanity was a curiosity, a primitive race of reckless explorers, noisy traders, and unpredictable diplomats who seemed to thrive in chaos. Their delegate that day was Captain Alex Ryder, chosen not for his eloquence but because he happened to be awake when the summons arrived. He strolled into the chamber wearing a half-zipped flight jacket, his hair slightly unkempt, and, most scandalous of all, holding a steaming cup of dark Terran coffee. The council waited for him to refuse, as everyone else had. Surely the fragile humans would cower before such danger. Instead, Ryder took a long sip, squinted at the swirling hologram of destruction, and said casually, "That's it?" The chamber erupted in shocked chatter. Ryder leaned back in his chair, balancing his cup in one hand. "You're all acting like this is the end of the world. Back home, we call this a Tuesday. Unstable gravity, collapsing structures, no guarantee of survival? We've dealt with worse in rush hour traffic." Ambassador Var's mandibles clicked in outrage. "You mock the council? That storm has annihilated fleets." "Yeah," Ryder said, shrugging. "Sounds like you flew straight at it. Ever heard of improvisation? Dieters? Duct tape? No." Gasps and hisses filled the chamber. Improvisation? Duct tape? These were not words of science or strategy, they were words of madness. Then Ryder stood, finished his coffee in one gulp, and placed the empty cup on the console. "Fine. If nobody else wants to try, humanity will. Send us the coordinates and hold my coffee." The chamber froze. And in that moment, without grand fleets or ancient wisdom, the fate of the galaxy shifted. Because where every other species saw the impossible, humanity had just seen a challenge. Into the anomaly. The council chamber had barely recovered from Captain Ryder's words when Earth submitted its official acceptance. The other species assumed it was bravado, some political maneuver that would be rescinded within days. But humanity didn't back down. 2 weeks later, their answer arrived in the form of a ship. The Endeavor was no sleek flagship or jewel of engineering. Compared to the Empire's silver-lined dreadnoughts or the crystalline Vaith cruisers, it looked cobbled together. Its hull was a patchwork of scavenged alloys, its engines whining with mismatched tones. To the elder species, it was laughable, more cargo freighter than research vessel. Yet, as the Endeavor prepped for launch, its crew radiated an unnerving confidence. The human crew. Commander Li Wei, a calm ex-Navy officer, coordinated the mission like she was planning a road trip rather than staring into a cosmic maelstrom. Chief Engineer Diaz wore oil-stained coveralls and swore he could duct tape the engines through anything. Navigator Sarah Holt, former stunt pilot, studied the shifting gravity waves like a surfer watching for the perfect wave. When alien observers asked about their odds of survival, Diaz laughed and said, "If she holds together, about 50-50. If not, we improvise." Improvisation. That word again. To aliens, it meant recklessness. To humans, it was a survival instinct. Crossing the threshold. The Endeavour fired her engines and slid into the anomaly. Alien fleets monitoring from a safe distance tensed as sensors went wild. Gravity twisted unpredictably. Radiation levels spiked to lethal ranges. Wormholes opened and closed like the mouths of great beasts. The insectoid VAR, observing through their flagship, whispered, "They will be torn apart within seconds." But seconds became minutes. Minutes became hours. Inside the storm, the crew worked like lunatics and like artists. When the main sensors failed, Sarah Holt grabbed a grease pencil and began sketching new routes directly onto the observation glass. "Think of it like hiking without a map," she said cheerfully. "You just trust the terrain." When the stabilizers overheated, Diaz rerouted coolant from the ship's food storage. "Who needs cold soup when you've got working engines?" he barked, elbow deep in cables. At one point, an unstable wormhole spat the Endeavour sideways, slamming it into an asteroid field. Rocks the size of cities tumbled around them. Instead of retreating, Holt grinned and said, "Finally, something familiar. Flying through traffic." She gunned the engines and wove the freighter between colliding boulders with insane precision. The Council's horror. Back in the Council chamber, delegates watched the live feed in disbelief. "This is chaos," the Vaith delegate shrieked, her crystalline body flashing red with alarm. "They are courting death," growled the Creel warlord. "No discipline, no order." And yet, they couldn't deny the results. Where their fleets had shattered, the humans advanced. "They aren't fighting the storm," murmured an elder historian. "They're playing with it." The breakthrough. Hours later, when all predictions said they should have been dead, the Endeavour emerged at the anomaly's core. There, hidden within the maelstrom, was the truth. A massive alien relic older than any known civilization, pulsing with energy that warped space-time itself. It was the source of the storm. Every species before had recoiled from it in terror. But Ryder's voice came calm over the comms. "Looks like a machine. Broken maybe." Diaz, grab the duct tape. "Let's fix this thing." The Council chamber went silent. For them, the impossible had always been a wall. For humanity, it was just another problem to tinker with. And for the first time in galactic history, hope stirred where fear had ruled. Fixing the impossible. The relic loomed before the Endeavour, a colossal construct of alien origin, older than the stars surrounding it. Its surface was a labyrinth of shattered rings, glowing fractures, and broken pylons venting streams of raw energy into the void. Every reading screamed untouchable. The energy output could vaporize fleets. The distortions around it had devoured entire expeditions. The Council's greatest minds had declared it unfixable centuries ago. But the humans weren't looking at it with reverence. They looked at it like mechanics staring at a broken engine. The human way. Diaz whistled low. "Well, I've seen worse carburetors." Holt squinted at the readouts. "Looks like the whole thing's running hot. Like, way too hot." Commander Lee simply asked, "Can we cool it down?" The aliens watching via holofeed nearly fainted. Cool it down? They were standing in the heart of a star-bending storm, and the humans treated it like an overheating car. But Ryder grinned. "Get me the EVA suits. We're going out there." Duct tape diplomacy. The Endeavour's cargo hold was raided for every jury-rigging tool humanity had brought. Industrial sealant, thermal shielding tiles, coolant hoses, even rolls of, yes, duct tape. One by one, the crew floated out into the void, mag boots clamping onto the relic's fractured surface. Radiation alarm screamed. Gravity twisted so hard that Holt nearly vomited in her helmet. But instead of panic, the humans cracked jokes over comms. Careful, Sarah, Diaz muttered, slapping down a heat sink the size of a truck. You hurl in there and I'm not cleaning it up. Relax, she shot back, strapping coolant hoses across a vent. I've flown through worse turbulence in coach class. Piece by piece, like children patching up a leaky raft, they stabilized the relic. They rerouted failing conduits with spare ship parts. They sealed fractures with plating scavenged from their own hull. At one point, Diaz actually used duct tape to hold a misaligned core panel in place. When Lee protested, he said, "Hey, don't argue with Terran engineering. The galaxy watches." Across the galaxy, trillions tuned into the Council's live broadcast. Entire species who had abandoned hope now watched in stunned silence as humans crawled across the ancient machine, laughing, swearing, sweating, and somehow making it work. The Vaith delegate whispered, "This is not science. This is madness." The Creel warlord growled, "No, this is war, waged against the impossible." For the first time, alien civilizations who had always looked down on Earth felt something they had never expected: respect. The moment of truth. As the last patch was sealed, the relic's pulsing energy began to stabilize. The storm that had raged for centuries slowed, then stilled. Hyperspace ripples calmed. Gravity returned to normal. The impossible had been undone. The council chamber erupted in disbelief and awe. Some cheered. Others wept. The VAR ambassador simply sat in silence, his wings trembling. On the comms, Ryder's voice crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, problem solved. You're welcome. Now, somebody better buy us a round when we get back." And just like that, humanity had done what no empire, no warlord, no ancient race had ever achieved. Not by power, not by precision, but by grit, improvisation, and a little duct tape. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. The legend of Hold My Coffee. The Endeavour returned to the Galactic Council with its patched hull scarred, its crew exhausted, and its captain still sipping a fresh cup of coffee. But the galaxy was not the same. The Council's silence. When Ryder and his crew walked back into the chamber, every delegate stood in stunned silence. The hologram of the once chaotic storm now showed calm space, stable trade routes glowing like healed arteries. The impossible was no longer impossible. For the first time in the Council's long history, none of the elder races had words. The insectoid Var simply lowered his wings in defeat. The crystalline Vaith dimmed their lights in acknowledgement. Even the Creel warlord, who had mocked humanity as reckless vermin, now stared at Ryder with something close to respect. It was Ryder who broke the silence. He set his coffee cup down on the council podium and said, "Told you. Just needed a little fixing up." The chamber erupted, not in outrage this time, but in thunderous applause. Whispers across the stars. Word spread faster than hyperspace. On mining colonies at the galaxy's edge, workers raised mugs of coffee in salute. On Creel warships, soldiers repeated the tale with awe. The humans went where we would not, and returned. On Vaith crystal worlds, the phrase, "Hold my coffee," was translated into their shimmering language, becoming a proverb for boldness. Children of dozens of species began chanting it in play. Pilots muttered it before launching into dangerous missions. Even hardened mercenaries began scrawling it on their armor, as if invoking a Terran charm. What had begun as Ryder's casual quip had become a rallying cry across the stars. Fear and respect. But admiration was only half the story. In the shadowed corners of the galaxy, warlords and schemers whispered with unease. If humans could tame the impossible with nothing but determination and duct tape, what else could they do? To the great empires, humanity was no longer the new race to be tolerated. They were an unpredictable force, too reckless to control, too resourceful to underestimate. Never fight a species, one Creel general warned his council, who laughs in the face of annihilation. A new seat at the table. At the next council session, a motion was raised, something unthinkable only months earlier. The humans, once regarded as chaotic upstarts, were to be given a permanent high council seat. Not as observers. Not as children at the table. But as equals among the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Ryder accepted the honor with his usual irreverence. High Council seat, huh? Does it come with free coffee refills? The chamber roared with laughter. The legend only grew. The legacy. Decades later, when new storms threatened and fresh impossibilities emerged, captains of every species invoked the same words before launching into danger. They didn't say, "It can't be done." They didn't say, "We refuse the mission." They said, with a grin, "Hold my coffee." And across the galaxy, civilizations would always remember the day a small, stubborn species from a backwater planet walked into an ancient empire, stared at the impossible, and acted like they'd seen far worse.